Okay, let's unpack this. Shaolin.
Hmm.
For so many of us, that single word paints a picture.
Oh, absolutely.
We see, towering temples nestled in misty mountains.
Mm.
We see monks in saffron robes executing these breathtaking feats of martial arts.
Mm.
We think of centuries of legend, history, and maybe a few classic kung fu movies thrown in there too.
Oh, definitely. It's a place where the popular image is incredibly powerful, perhaps, more powerful for many people than the actual historical reality.
Yeah.
The line between that deeply ingrained myth and, well, verifiable fact is incredibly blurry.
It really is.
And for anyone genuinely curious about the actual history and culture of Shaolin, navigating that landscape, figuring out what's real and what's maybe more inspiring story,
Yeah.
well, that's a significant challenge.
Really is. The internet offers just an ocean of information, but also, let's be honest, an ocean of noise and sometimes just plain fantasy.
Right.
So in this deep dive, we're focusing our lens on one specific online resource that makes it its explicit mission to cut through that noise and bring you closer to the historical core.
We are diving deep into the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website. You can find it at shaolinmonastery.blogspot.com.
ShaolinMonastery.blogspot.com.
Yeah, it's a very specific corner of the internet, but wow, one that offers remarkable treasures for those who know where to look.
And that's our mission today, to take you on a guided tour through this unique digital archive. We're going to unpack what it contains, try to understand the thoughtful approach it takes to separating history from myth.
Which is key.
Absolutely. And explain why, if you have any interest in the actual documented past of Shaolin, this site is not just useful, but I'd argue genuinely essential.
Yeah, it's far more than just a collection of facts. It has a very particular perspective and purpose.
It does. The stated purpose of the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society, as you'll find right there on the website itself, is remarkably clear and, well, scholarly. They are dedicated to collecting, researching, translating, and preserving historical information specifically relating to the Shaolin Temple in Henan, China.
And that list is important. Collecting, researching, translating, preserving. It shows a real methodology.
Exactly. That commitment to rigorous methodology is really the bedrock of their mission.
And the why behind that mission is equally compelling. Their stated goal is pretty straightforward. The site was created to assist current and future generations in understanding Shaolin heritage and culture. They clearly see this digital space as a crucial tool for ensuring that this deep, complex history isn't lost or, completely overshadowed by popular fiction.
What immediately strikes you when you explore the site, and something that I think really sets it apart, is their philosophical approach to this subject matter, which is, let's face it, inherently steeped in both history and myth. They openly acknowledge upfront that, quote, in China, separating myth from history can be difficult, and Shaolin is no exception. They lean into that complexity rather than trying to, pretend it doesn't exist.
That acknowledgement is incredibly important. So many sources either uncritically accept every legend as fact, or they swing, completely to the other extreme and dismiss anything that isn't empirically verifiable as just worthless.
Right, like it has no value at all.
Exactly. This site takes a much more nuanced position. It recognizes that while a story might not be historically accurate in every single detail, some lore does capture the inherited essence of the Shaolin mythos.
Okay. So there's a kind of cultural or spiritual truth maybe embedded in the narrative, even if the events didn't happen exactly as told.
Precisely. Even if the specific events didn't unfold quite like that.
That feels like a very sophisticated way to approach something like Shaolin. It's built on a premise that sort of serves as a guiding light for their research. This idea that behind every myth, there's usually some grain of truth. And behind every legend, there's usually some historical fact.
Exactly. And this allows them the intellectual freedom to explore what they actually term the modern Shaolin mythos, how these stories have evolved and how they're perceived today, while simultaneously and rigorously traversing history, legend, culture, tradition, fact, and fiction.
So they're not saying everything is equally true, factually speaking.
Not at all.
But they are saying everything is worthy of examination because it contributes to the overall understanding of Shaolin.
Right. It demonstrates a real scholarly maturity in how they handle source material, where Let's face it, empirical evidence might be scarce, but the cultural narrative is incredibly rich and impactful.
Yeah.
They manage to respect the power of the tradition and the stories while maintaining a demand for historical rigor wherever it's possible to apply it.
And this scholarly approach is actually introduced on the site with uh, quite beautiful, almost poetic language.
Oh, it is, yeah.
They talk about the transformative power of written words, how they can serve as a passport to your imagination.
I love that phrase.
Me too. It nicely balances the serious historical and scholarly intent with, well, the inherent romance and allure that draws people to Shaolin in the first place. They frame the process of exploring the site as an epic journey.
So you're getting the commitment to deep historical research and evidence-based understanding, but it's presented in a way that acknowledges the wonder and mystery that surrounds Shaolin.
Yeah, it feels like they're attempting to build a kind of cultural bridge,
Yeah.
connecting the often dry world of academic study with the living, breathing, sometimes myth-laden stream of traditional wisdom.
And the structural elements of that bridge are built from some truly invaluable materials.
Yeah.
Which leads us, I think, to the tangible content that makes this site such an absolute goldmine for anyone doing serious research or, honestly, just wanting to understand the deeper history.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Forget the philosophy for a second. Let's talk about the evidence.
Yeah.
The actual stuff that underpins their work. One of the website's most significant contributions, I think, is its dedicated effort to preserve and present rare historical photographs, particularly those taken before the monastery suffered that devastating destruction in the 1928 fire.
And these aren't just, incidental old pictures. They are irreplaceable visual records of structures and aspects of the temple that were physically wiped out. Gone.
So the site features photographic documentation that serves as a window into this lost past, dating back to the very early 20th century.
Yeah, like the 7 photographs taken by the renowned French sinologist Emmanuel-Edouard Chauvin.
Chauvin, right.
On August 10th, 1907, the site points out, quite significantly, that these very well may be the first photographs ever taken of Shaolin Temple.
Wow. Imagine that the very first time a camera captured the physical reality of this ancient place.
And importantly, these weren't just scenic shots. They documented specific, vital structures of the monastery. The mountain gate, the style forest, which is a crucial repository of historical inscriptions, the Great Hero Treasure Hall.
That's the main Buddha hall, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Also, Dharma Hall, where scriptures were kept and, sadly, burned in 1928, the Standing and Snow Pavilion, which is linked to the Bodhidharma legend and the Thousand Buddha Hall.
So to see these buildings as they actually stood in 1907 before they were destroyed,
Yeah.
that's just immense value for historical research.
Absolutely. And for understanding the temple's layout and appearance prior to that disaster.
But it doesn't stop there, does it? The site also houses copies of absolutely crucial Japanese photographs from 1920.
Yes. These have their own fascinating story of rediscovery, apparently found by the current abbot, Venerable Shi Yongsen, during a visit to Japan back in 1990.
And their historical significance is, well, almost unparalleled.
It really is. The site emphasizes that they document Shaolin Temple prior to the destruction of 1928. But the real impact, the thing that really blows you away, is that they were subsequently reproduced and used as basis for recovering the historical appearance of Shaolin Monastery.
Wait, hang on. So these photos weren't just put into an archive somewhere. They became the actual visual blueprints for reconstruction?
Precisely. Think about that for a second. A photograph of a building that was destroyed, completely gone, was then used by architects and builders decades later to help recreate it as accurately as possible.
That's incredible.
The site uses the example of the drum tower photo, showing how it directly informed the rebuilding effort. It turns these images from mere historical records into active participants in the temple's physical resurrection.
It gives these photos a functional significance far beyond just historical curiosity. And I read that the source mentions rumors about the 1920 collection. Like there might have been more.
Yes, that's another point the site highlights, and it really underscores the difficulty of this kind of preservation work. They note rumors suggesting over 300 such Japanese photographs might have existed originally.
300?
Yeah, but apparently only 67 were eventually acquired. And that detail itself tells a story, doesn't it? The scattering of historical artifacts, the challenge of tracking them down, the likelihood that so much was probably lost forever. The site, by making these 67 accessible, is preserving a crucial fragment of what survived.
And the fact that external sources like, I saw articles on martial arts history sites like Kung Fu Coffee Break, they specifically cite this Blogspot site for these 1920s images,
Right.
including photos of things like the manuscripts in the Dharma Hall, which were destroyed in 1928, and the plaque of Emperor Kangxi. That really solidifies the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website's position, doesn't it? As a trusted, unique visual archive for these assets that you seemingly can't find anywhere else online.
Absolutely. And beyond these remarkable photographs, the site is also a treasure trove for digitized historical documents and texts.
Okay, like what kind of documents can you actually find or access here?
Well, you can find images of illustrations from centuries-old temple records. For example, there's an image featured of Vajrapani, or Kimnara, a protector deity figure from the Shaolin Monastery annals, dating all the way back to 1696.
1696, wow.
Yeah, seeing an illustration of one of Shaolin's protector deities from that specific era is fascinating. Vajrapani, or Kimnara in this context, they're often depicted as these incredibly powerful guardians, figures associated with strength and protection in Buddhist lore, which is very fitting for a, warrior monastery.
And the site isn't just showing illustrations, it's making major historical texts accessible too.
Exactly. A prime example is the Qing-era Shaolin Monastery Chronicles from 1748. The site doesn't just mention it, it details its rediscovery and translation. And here's a critical point. The site provides download links for both the original Chinese text and its English translation.
Hold on. The English translation as well.
Yes, and according to the sources we looked at, this English translation was actually first published by this website.
Get out. So the first ever English translation of a significant 18th century Shaolin historical chronicle was made available to the world through this blogspot site.
That is what the source material strongly indicates, which is, that's a monumental contribution to global scholarship.
Absolutely.
And to anyone who doesn't read classical Chinese, but wants direct access to primary source material on Shaolin history, the editor's explanation on the site notes that the chronicles cover everything from the temple's architecture and legends to its relics, inscriptions, even poetry.
Imagine the detail you can find there. Descriptions of buildings now gone, versions of legends recorded centuries ago.
Copies of inscriptions that might still be visible, or maybe ones that are lost. It shows the incredible breadth of information contained within this single text, and the site makes it accessible.
They also seem to have organized information, too. Like there's a Shaolin historical timeline post from November 2017 mentioned.
Yes, they provide structured chronological information, which is invaluable for researchers trying to piece together the long and, frankly, very complex history.
Yeah.
And reflecting their scholarly commitment, they actually include a caveat about potential translation inaccuracies in some areas. They recognize that this is difficult, ongoing work, and it's open to refinement as knowledge deepens.
That's honest. It's another sign of their dedication to accuracy, even while providing access.
Definitely. So when you look at this section, the website isn't just a static repository, it's a dynamic archive. It's curating and presenting both raw historical evidence, those incredibly rare photos that literally helped rebuild the temple, and interpreted content like timelines, and, crucially, making digitized, newly translated scholarly texts available globally.
It truly functions as a vital digital bridge, helping researchers and enthusiasts connect with a past that was almost entirely erased by destruction.
And speaking of connecting with foundational knowledge, that brings us to a central figure whose monumental scholarship is given significant prominence on the site, Grandmaster Shi Daquini.
Ah, yes, Shi Daquin. Someone who dedicated his life to preserving and disseminating authentic Shaolin knowledge. Who exactly was Grandmaster Shi Daquin?
Grandmaster Shi Daquin, spelled in Chinese, was a truly pivotal figure in the landscape of modern Shaolin scholarship and practice. Born in 1943 near the temple in Dingfeng, Henan, he sadly passed away in 2008. His birth names were Sun In Wang and Wang Changqing.
And his connection to the temple was lifelong and deep, right?
Absolutely. He became a 31st generation disciple at just 15 years old. Think about that, 15. And he served directly within the temple as a Shaolin protection monk for an incredible 31 years.
He even held the position of abbot for a time, before the current abbot, Shi Yongsan, succeeded him.
That's correct. And his training wasn't limited to just martial arts, though. That's important.
Right. He embodied the broader traditions.
Totally. His knowledge base was vast. It encompassed not just kung fu, but also acupuncture, qigong bone treatment, specific traditional styles like Lohan Chuan and He Hu Chuan, the Yijin Jing, that famous qigong set often associated with Bodhidharma, and he was a practicing Chinese herbalist.
So he was deeply versed in the three treasures of Shaolin, the Chan Buddhism, the martial arts, and the medicine.
Exactly. And the source notes something particularly interesting about his later life. He apparently became a Shaolin layman monk.
A layman monk, what does that mean?
Well, it seems he lived outside the temple, but retained his identity, his authority, and his connection. It even mentions he had permission to consume meat and beer, unlike fully ordained monks bound by stricter precepts.
Mm-hmm.
This adaptive approach to his monastic vows seemingly allowed him greater flexibility for his extensive research and travel compared to being confined within the strict temple rules.
That's a fascinating nuance.
Yeah.
It suggests his dedication to preserving knowledge maybe transcended the traditional monastic structure, allowing him to operate more freely in the world as a scholar and an emissary.
I think that's a great way to put it. It highlights how he seamlessly bridged both the traditional practitioner role, the monk, the master, the abbot, with the modern role of scholar, author, and global ambassador. His life's work is really a testament to preserving deep-seated tradition while finding ways to make it accessible and relevant to a global audience.
And the culmination of that life's work is his absolute magnum opus, the Shaolin Encyclopedia.
Its full Chinese title is Shaolin Si Lo Shu Binka Quanshu, and honestly monumental, barely begins to describe it.
Okay, give us a scale. How big are we talking?
Completed in 1992, it comprises 4 massive volumes. Together, they span nearly 4,000 pages.
4,000 pages.
Yeah, and contain an astonishing 3.8 million Chinese characters.
Whoa.
Just to give you some perspective, a typical English novel might have, 80,000 words? This is millions of characters of dense, technical, historical information.
Okay, so what does it cover in all those pages? It must be everything.
Pretty much everything you can imagine related to Shaolin martial arts and medicine. An exhaustive range of Shaolin forms, weapons techniques, Kaiyang practices, detail injury remedies, knowledge of pressure points, dim-mak traditional medicine principles, and crucially, compiled historical records specifically pertaining to the warrior monks themselves.
And the purpose, as highlighted in the sources, was directly tied to historical loss, to that 1928 fire.
Precisely. The encyclopedia was explicitly aimed at collecting, compiling, and restoring information that had been lost or scattered during that devastating fire, which specifically destroyed manuscripts and records kept in the Dharma Hall.
So this wasn't just an academic project. It was an act of historical and cultural recovery.
Absolutely. Driven by a desire to reclaim what was almost lost forever, he was actively reconstructing centuries of knowledge that had literally gone up in flames.
That's an act of scholarly heroism, really.
It really is. The monks themselves apparently regard it as the most definitive publication of their system, and it's widely believed to be the largest ever on any martial art globally.
Not just Shaolin, but potentially any martial arts system ever documented.
That's the claim. Think about that scope. It's truly staggering.
Does it include visual aids, for martial arts?
Yes. Crucially, it includes over 1,000 diagrams and drawings illustrating techniques, which is absolutely essential for conveying the specifics of martial arts forms and movements.
So this is the ultimate authority. But accessing it presents challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for, us non-Chinese speakers.
Significant challenges, yes. And the website is transparent about these. The primary barrier for a global audience is that it has never been translated into English.
Never. Wow.
Nope. The estimated cost for translation alone is apparently around $75,000 USD, or 600,000 RMB. Just a prohibitive amount for individuals or even many institutions.
Yeah, getting physical copies is also difficult and expensive.
Yeah. The estimated cost for just reprinting the physical volumes is also substantial, over $70,000 USD, which makes any existing original editions true collector's items. It highlights the scarcity even in China.
The website providing this context is valuable in itself, just managing expectations about how easily you can get your hands on this definitive work or understand it without language skills.
Absolutely. But here's the critical point. This is what makes the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website so vital. Despite these immense translation and reprint barriers, the site even links to PDFs of all 4 volumes.
Wait, really? So even though it's not translated, you can actually access the entire massive 4,000-page encyclopedia through links provided on this website.
That is what the source material confirms. This is huge.
That's incredible.
It means that this foundational, authoritative text, otherwise largely inaccessible due to cost and language barriers, is available for anyone with the determination to explore it. Whether you have Chinese language skills or maybe utilize machine translation tools, which are getting better,
Right.
it immediately positions the site as an essential gateway to this unparalleled resource.
It makes it the single most important online portal for anyone serious about studying authentic Shaolin arts or history at its deepest documented level. It solidifies the encyclopedia status as a foundational text for study and practice, and the website makes that study possible.
And Shi Daquan's dedication to preservation didn't begin or end with the encyclopedia. His commitment is further exemplified by his role in safeguarding another key text, the Shaolin Quanpu.
The Shaolin Fist Form Manual, what's the story behind that one?
This was another critical text, apparently an 8-volume, 48-chapter series. The original manual was hand-copied and then hidden by a monk named Yang Sheng for over 50 years after the 1928 fire.
Hidden for 50 years.
Yeah, think about that dedication, keeping a precious manuscript hidden away for half a century just to protect it from destruction or confiscation.
That is an incredible act of faith and preservation. Just amazing.
It really is. And then Yang Sheng entrusted this hidden treasure to Shi Daquan for safekeeping and, importantly, for dissemination, sharing the knowledge.
So it shows a multi-generational chain of preservation within the temple itself, passing knowledge like a sacred torch.
Exactly. And Shi Daquan himself was incredibly prolific beyond these major works.
Yeah, the sources mentioned he wrote a lot of books.
Over 57 books specifically on martial arts subjects. This incredible output earned him the well-deserved title, the King of Shaolin Books.
The King of Shaolin Books. That title perfectly encapsulates his legacy, doesn't it? Putting pen to paper to save and share knowledge. And he held significant leadership roles, too.
Absolutely. He wasn't just a writer, he was a leader in the martial arts community. He served as vice president of the Henan Martial Arts Association, secretary-chief of the China Shaolin Chuan Research Center, and president of the China Shaolin Wushu University. He was actively shaping the academic and practical landscape of martial arts study in China.
And his influence wasn't just confined to China either, right? He traveled.
Not at all. His dedication took him around the world. He traveled extensively as a guest speaker to countries like the US, Japan, Singapore, New Zealand. His publications apparently reached readers in over 80 countries. He was a global force in making authentic Shaolin knowledge available.
And the anecdote about his final days is particularly moving, I thought.
It truly highlights his unwavering commitment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Diagnosed with cancer, his primary concern, according to the story, wasn't his own health, but ensuring his life's work would continue.
Wow.
He specifically entrusted over 100 unpublished manuscripts to his wife for publication, ensuring that decades of research and writing would not be lost after his passing.
That level of dedication is just simply astonishing.
It really is.
And the fact that the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website chooses to feature his work so prominently, making information about his encyclopedia and other contributions accessible, means that his vital work in preserving Shaolin's heritage is amplified and available to a global audience.
Exactly. The site doesn't just host documents, it champions the scholars like Shi Daquan, who dedicated their lives to this history.
So we've looked at the website's clear mission and its incredible archival content, highlighting the monumental work of figures like Shi Daquan. Now, let's maybe shift our focus from the archive itself to the historical narrative and the rich traditions of Shaolin that the site explores and helps you understand.
Right, moving from the documents about the history to the history itself, as presented and analyzed through the site's lens.
The site traces the monastery's history, which, as we touched upon, is a really dramatic tapestry. It's woven with threads of immense influence, repeated destruction, and remarkable resilience.
It begins, according to historical accounts, around 495 AD. During the Northern Wei dynasty, it was founded by an Indian monk named Batuo, also known as Buddhapadra, on Mount Song in what is now Henan province.
And the name Shaolin itself comes from the location.
Exactly, literally meaning the Temple of Shao Forest. Then comes the figure central to so many legends, Bodhidharma.
Ah, Bodhidharma. Can't talk Shaolin without him.
Pretty much. His legendary arrival is placed around 527 AD. He is credited, at least in traditional narratives, with introducing Chan Buddhism, or Zen, as it's more commonly known in the West, via Japan to China.
Okay.
And famously, the legend attributes to him the development of physical exercises, maybe including early martial arts forms, to help the monks stay awake and physically fit during long periods of intense meditation and yoga practices.
So that's considered the legendary starting point for Shaolin Kung Fu as we understand it today.
That's the traditional story, yeah. Initially, the martial arts aspect was perhaps framed more about physical discipline and spiritual endurance than outright combat.
Which makes sense. Intense spiritual practice needs a strong physical foundation.
Exactly. Then comes the pivotal Tang Dynasty period. This is where documented history starts to intersect significantly with the martial reputation. Shaolin monks famously provided military assistance to Li Shimin.
Who would later become Emperor Taizong.
Right, helping him suppress a rebellion. They essentially fought for the future emperor.
Wow. So they were involved in military campaigns.
Yes. And in gratitude for their crucial assistance, the temple received significant imperial favor, grants of land, special dispensations, things like that. There's a key historical artifact, a stele from 728 AD, which the site would likely reference or discuss, that actually lists the names of the 13 monks who participated in this campaign.
So that historical event really solidified Shaolin's connection to martial prowess in the annals of the state. It wasn't just a place of worship.
Exactly. It became a significant, even sort of quasi-military entity in the political landscape, and this influence continued to grow. During the Ming Dynasty from 1368 to 1644, Shaolin truly flourished. It was a prominent center of both Buddhism and martial arts.
Golden Age, maybe?
Kind of a golden age, yeah. Their reputation for martial skill grew into legend. They provided military support against various threats, including internal peasant rebellions and the Japanese pirates known as woku who raided the coast. They enjoyed considerable government support during this time.
But history is rarely a straight line upwards, is it? The Qing dynasty brought a reversal of fortune.
It did. From 1644 to 1912, under the Qing rulers who were Manchus, not Han Chinese Shaolin, lost much of its former influence. The monastery was often viewed with suspicion by the new regime, partly due to its past allegiances to the preceding Ming dynasty and, rumors of sheltering Ming loyalists.
And this period is infamous for the story of Shaolin being burned by the king.
Yes, it's a famous story, though the historical details, like exactly when and how extensive the burning was, are debated by historians. But the period undeniably marked a decline in the Kumpel's official standing and likely led to martial arts practices going underground to some extent.
And then the 20th century brought even more devastation.
Oh, absolutely. The severe fire in 1928 during warlord conflicts, and then significant damage again during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 70s. The sources and the site itself make it very clear that most of the structures you see at Shaolin today are relatively recent rebuildings.
Often based on those crucial historical photographs we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It really is this recurring cycle. Periods of immense cultural and martial significance, followed by destruction, and then painstaking rebuilding, renovation, and adaptation. It highlights the extraordinary resilience of Shaolin as an institution, and maybe even more so as a cultural idea.
And understanding that resilience and the history inevitably brings us back to the question that fascinates so many. How did martial arts become so deeply intertwined with a Buddhist monastery?
Right. The site explores this by looking at the fundamental connection between Chan Buddhism and martial arts at Shaolin. Because Shaolin is globally recognized as the cradle, the birthplace, of Chinese Zen, or Chen Buddhism.
And the Bodhidharma legend, whether it's pure historical fact or more of a cultural narrative, is central to explaining this intertwined path.
It is. Him bringing both Chan practice and physical disciplines. As the site would likely present, the initial purpose often attributed to the martial exercises was very pragmatic. Maintain the monks' physical health, stamina, mental alertness, all required for the rigorous demands of prolonged meditation and yoga.
Makes perfect sense. You need a strong vessel for intense spiritual work.
Exactly. Then, over time, as the monastery faced external threats, bandits, soldiers, rebels, the practical need for self-defense and the protection of the temple's inhabitants and its valuable properties led to the development and refinement of actual combat techniques.
But, as the site might explore, it wasn't just about practical fighting, was it? There's a deeper spiritual dimension.
Yes, absolutely. It's linked to the veneration of Buddhist protector deities.
Like the Vajrapani or Kimnara figure we saw in that 1696 Annals illustration you mentioned.
Precisely. Vajrapani is a significant figure in Mahayana Buddhism, often depicted as this incredibly powerful protector wielding a thunderbolt, a Vajra. Incorporating veneration for such deities into martial practice elevates it beyond mere physical combat. It becomes a spiritual act of protection, defending the Dharma, defending the monastic community.
I remember the critique mentioned scholarly perspectives, like Mira Shahar's work being relevant here, offering a sort of demythologized account.
Yes, scholars like Mir Shahar and the site would likely reference or reflect these views, offer a more nuanced perspective. They might suggest that while Shaolin monks certainly practice martial arts, the traditional open-hand kung fu forms might have initially served primarily for physical fitness and spiritual cultivation,
Okay.
and that the historical effectiveness of their combat applications, particularly things like staff fighting, probably varied quite a bit over time depending on the specific era and the specific monks involved.
So, this scholarly view might challenge the popular image of Shaolin monks being universally invincible fighters throughout history. It wasn't quite like the movies.
It offers a more nuanced view, definitely. It suggests focusing on the deep integration of martial arts with Chen Buddhist practice, emphasizing their multifaceted purposes, physical conditioning, mental discipline, spiritual cultivation, and yes, practical self-defense when needed, rather than solely portraying them as an army of super fighters.
So understanding it as a holistic system for self-cultivation, not just a fighting school.
Exactly. And the site also gives glimpses into the internal traditions and rituals of monastic life itself, which are fascinating.
Yeah, like the three treasures of Shaolin.
Right, which we mentioned, Shidakina embodied, Chan, that Zen meditation, W, Ilave, martial arts, and Ye, medicine. These aren't just abstract concepts. They are the three pillars passed down through lineage, forming the fundamental basis of daily temple life and practice.
And they detail the Shaolin generational Dharma name system. That sounds interesting.
It is. It's a fascinating tradition established way back in the 13th century that is apparently still actively used today. This system dictates how a monk receives their name upon ordination.
How does it work?
It consists of the surname Shi, which means clan or family, and denotes belonging to the Buddha's spiritual family, then a middle name, which is a generation name taken from a specific classic poem.
From a poem.
Yeah, the sequence of characters from the poem indicates the monk's generation in the lineage. And finally, a unique personal name given to them. So, for example, the Day in Shi Dequin's name is his specific generational character.
That's a living connection to centuries of lineage right there in the name. It makes each monk's name a historical marker.
It really does. It's a beautiful illustration of the enduring monastic lineage and how personal identity is tied to the history of the institution. And they also discuss perhaps the most controversial and visually striking ritual, head branding, or jieba.
The ordination scars on the scalp.
Yes, this practice involves burning small spots on a monk's scalp, typically 9 of them, using incense sticks during the ordination ceremony. These marks represent the taking of the Buddhist precepts. The site notes it is, understandably, an extremely painful ritual.
And it wasn't always practiced, was it? It was banned for a long time.
Correct. It was banned in China for a significant period. The site mentions that this ancient ceremony was performed for the first time in approximately 300 years, back in 2007.
So it was revived relatively recently. That's quite something.
Yes. And a noteworthy modern example is given. Abbot Shi Youngsin apparently selected monk Shi Yanfan, who is a Westerner, to participate in this revived ceremony.
A Westerner, wow.
Yeah, that detail illustrates a recent openness, perhaps, in the temple to including international disciples and even the most traditional and physically demanding rituals.
So the site goes into these specific, often less publicized aspects of monastic tradition, giving you a much more complete picture of life inside the temple walls, historically and sometimes even recently.
Which naturally brings us back to one of the site's foundational missions: confronting and dissecting the myths versus the reality.
Right. This is where their commitment to historical rigor really shines through, isn't it?
It is. A prime example they discuss is the forearm branding myth.
Ah, the famous one from movies and maybe the old TV show. The obstacle course, the 108 wooden dummies, and then lifting the heavy red-hot cauldron at the end to brand the dragon and tiger designs onto your forearms.
That's the one, proving you're a true Shaolin master.
Yeah.
The site approaches this with a healthy, necessary dose of skepticism. They explicitly question if such narratives have any basis in fact or if they're simply myth.
And they don't just question it, they back it up.
Exactly. They use logical analysis and historical context. They point out logistical impossibilities like the fact that branding with hot metal or objects simply doesn't produce intricate, detailed designs like dragons and tigers. The scarring is just, well, messy.
Imprecise.
So the physical reality contradicts the legend pretty strongly, completely. And they note the complete lack of historical evidence or documentation of such a test ever taking place at the temple. Modern monks, according to the sources cited, universally dismiss this story as pure fiction, likely created in later popular literature or folklore.
It's a powerful myth, though, isn't it? It's shaped so much of the popular understanding of Shaolin initiation.
It absolutely has, largely thanks to popular culture like martial arts films. The site helps you see why it's a myth, even while acknowledging its cultural impact. They also examine other legendary accounts, like the historical role of Bodhidharma versus the widely spread legend of him being the founder of Shaolin Kung Fu as a complete system from day one.
Trying to separate the historical figure from the legend.
Right. They help you distinguish between these captivating stories and verified historical events, like the documented military aid provided to the Tang Emperor Li Shimin. That actually happened.
And they explain practical historical structures within the temple, too, like the dual monastic system.
Yes, this is key to understanding who actually did what at Shaolin historically. The site would explain the division between scholarly monks, known as Wenzang.
Wenzang.
Yeah. They're fully ordained, follow strict monastic precepts like vegetarianism and celibacy, and focus on scriptural study, meditation, and managing the temple's spiritual and administrative affairs.
Okay. And the others?
And then there were the warrior monks, or Musang.
Musang.
They resided in the temple but typically took only 5 lay precepts, which are less strict than full ordination. Their primary focus was martial training and the physical protection of the monastery.
That distinction makes so much sense. It explains why not every single monk at Shaolin was or is necessarily a martial artist.
Exactly. It was a functional division based on roles and focus. The site helps you understand this historical reality. By systematically presenting these analyses, often using historical documents as counter-evidence to myths, the website equips you, the listener, to navigate the complex landscape of Shaolin stories. It gives you the tools to distinguish between popular lore and documented history based on the evidence they provide.
So the site is invaluable for understanding the past, cutting through myth with historical documents and scholarly analysis. But how does it fit into Shaolin in the modern era? Because Shaolin today is a very different place than the one documented in those 1907 or 1920 photographs.
It absolutely is. Shaolin Monastery today is not just a religious institution, it's a major, almost iconic tourist hotspot. And it continues to be an important pilgrimage site for Buddhists and martial artists from around the world.
And what most tourists or even international students encounter is often a presentation of Shaolin Kung Fu in highly standardized forms, right? Known as wushu, often taught and performed for audiences.
Right. The landscape immediately surrounding the temple is now filled with numerous martial arts schools, large and small. And Shaolin culture, or at least the popular image of it, has spread globally through films, traveling performance troupes, exhibitions, and training centers everywhere.
But this modernization and globalization hasn't been without its complexities and criticisms, has it?
No, definitely not, like the commercialization aspect.
Yeah.
The sources acknowledge the criticisms sometimes leveled against the current abbot, Xiangxin, regarding the perceived over-commercialization of the temple and its heritage. There's also just the simple reality of being a major tourist site. The sources mention things like pushy vendors near the temple gates.
Right.
These elements create a real tension, between preserving a deep, ancient spiritual and historical heritage and engaging with the economic realities and opportunities of the modern world.
So the website, by focusing squarely on historical documentation and scholarly analysis, offers a really different perspective than the one you might encounter if you simply visit the temple today or watch a polished wushu performance designed for tourists.
It provides a crucial counterpoint. Its function is to bridge scholarly research and popular engagement, but by clearly prioritizing the scholarly side. By presenting authentic historical documents, those rare photos, the digitized chronicles, and referencing authoritative works like Shadikrian's encyclopedia, the site acts as a vital resource for disseminating accurate information.
And this directly helps to counter the prevalent popular myths and the sensationalized, sometimes overly commercialized narratives that tend to dominate the modern perception of Shaolin.
Exactly. It really stands in contrast to the heavily romanticized portrayals we see in countless films featuring figures like Jackie Chan or Jet Li, or maybe the intense, sometimes simplified training experiences offered at certain commercial centers that claim a Shaolin connection.
So the blog, in essence, positions itself as a skeptical, research-driven resource.
I think that sums it up well. This provides an incredibly valuable counterpoint and a complementary perspective to the modern, highly visible, and often commercialized face of Shaolin. Its focus on documented history and critical analysis gives it a credibility that's underscored by the fact that, as we mentioned, it is cited as a source in other reputable articles on Shaolin history and martial arts. It's recognized by people doing serious work in the field.
So, given its depth and focus on historical evidence, who is the main audience for a site like this? Who is it really for?
Well, the site is clearly aimed at a specific type of visitor. You're looking at serious martial artists interested in the historical roots of their practice, academic historians specializing in Chinese history or Buddhism, and maybe enthusiasts who are genuinely interested in the evidence-based history of Shaolin rather than just the popular legends. It's for people who want to go deeper than the surface level.
And how is the engagement on the site itself? Does it function like a community forum, or is it more like visiting a library?
That's a good question. The site does have features for audience engagement, like comment threads on posts and social share buttons. However, the sources note that active engagement in comment sections is often low.
Okay.
Suggesting it functions primarily as an archival resource that people visit to find specific information rather than a place for ongoing discussion. That said, some older posts do show discussions, particularly on topics like accessing the encyclopedia downloads.
Right, because that's huge.
Exactly, which demonstrates that there is indeed global interest in accessing these rare materials, even if the site isn't exactly a bustling social community day to day.
So its value is less about dynamic discussion on the site itself, and more about being a trusted, stable repository of hard-to-find, verified information.
Precisely. And that leads us to a final crucial point highlighted in the sources, one that puts the entire value of the site into a broader, maybe slightly worrying context: the significant challenge of digital preservation.
The inherent fragility of information that exists only online. It's not like a stone tablet.
Exactly. Well, the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website is undeniably a profoundly valuable digital resource right now, containing these rare photos and texts. Online resources are, by their very nature, impermanent.
They don't have the physical permanence of a book in a library or an artifact in a museum, do they?
Not at all. Websites can suddenly disappear if the owner stops paying for hosting or loses interest. Hyperlinks break over time. Link rot is a real thing. Older data formats can become obsolete and unreadable by future software. And the free platforms they reside on, like Blogspot in this case, can change their policies or even cease operations entirely.
Yeah.
This is a well-documented, ongoing problem in the field of digital heritage preservation.
And for a resource like this, which is hosted on a free platform, however valuable it is, that underscores a critical vulnerability.
It really does. Relying on free, non-archival platforms for disseminating and preserving cultural heritage, especially information as unique and valuable as the materials on this site, carries inherent risks. What happens if the site owner can no longer maintain it, or the platform changes its terms, or the PDF files become unreadable in 20 years?
It highlights an urgent need, doesn't it, for something more robust?
An absolutely urgent need for robust, proactive digital preservation strategies specifically designed to safeguard this kind of invaluable historical and cultural information for future generations. It really raises the question of responsibility.
Who should take on that responsibility? It can't just be one dedicated individual on a Blogspot site forever.
Well, the source material doesn't give a definitive answer, but implicitly it suggests institutions with the capacity for long-term digital stewardship. Maybe national archives, major universities with digital humanities programs, or perhaps even the Shaolin Monastery itself, collaborating with digital preservation experts.
Because without dedicated efforts, these valuable digital cultural resources are really at risk.
They are. They risk becoming what some call digital echoes, things that just fade away over time, leaving frustrating and potentially irreparable gaps in the historical record for anyone trying to study Shaolin or any other digitally preserved heritage decades from now. It's kind of a quiet crisis in the digital age.
That is a powerful and sobering thought to consider. So to wrap up our deep dive today,
we've spent this time exploring the Shaolin Monastery Historical Society website. That's shaolinmonastery.blogspot.com.
And hopefully we've demonstrated to you why it's such a unique, valuable, and frankly essential resource if you care about this topic. It provides unparalleled online access to incredibly rare historical photographs. It digitizes and offers, apparently, the first English translations of crucial historical texts, like the 1748 Chronicles.
Which is huge.
And it champions foundational scholarship, such as Grandmaster Charlie Kun's monumental, previously almost inaccessible, Shaolin Encyclopedia, by linking directly to the PDFs.
It serves as a vital tool to help you, the listener, navigate the complex world of Shaolin stories. By grounding its content in historical evidence and critical analysis, it helps you cut through the layers of myth and understand the authentic, nuanced, and complex history and traditions of Shaolin. Not just the movie version.
It's really a testament to the enduring efforts of individuals from monks in centuries past, hiding manuscripts in secret, to modern scholars creating and maintaining this website, all dedicated to preserving Shaolin's incredibly rich heritage despite centuries of destruction, political upheaval, and, let's face it, popular misinterpretation. It's a quiet act of historical preservation in the digital age.
And perhaps the most provocative thought to leave you with today builds directly on that final point about digital preservation. As we increasingly rely on these sometimes vulnerable digital platforms to share and preserve cultural knowledge, just how many other invaluable historical and cultural resources, perhaps just like this one for other topics, exist only online, maybe on platforms not built for the long haul? And what is being done right now to ensure their survival for future generations before they simply vanish into the digital ether? It makes you think about the fragility of even our most robust-seeming online archives.
It absolutely does. But for now, if your curiosity about Shaolin history, its true traditions, and its incredible journey through the centuries has been sparked by our conversation, I highly encourage you to explore shaolinmonastery.blogspot.com for yourself. Go see those rare photos that helped rebuild the temple, delve into the chronicles, learn more about the King of Shaolin books, see the depth of history it holds, and maybe appreciate the act of preservation it represents while it's still there.
It's a journey well worth taking for anyone seeking the real roots of Shaolin.